Hello and welcome. In the last blog post that was on my website, I had put an article about how to sing at volume without belting. I don't mean a healthy kind of belt that we teach people in music theatre and rock and contemporary. I'm talking about using volume incorrectly, the kind of volume that we're using in order to try and sing from low to high and not understanding how our voices work and what to do with them. I'm going to give you a couple of demonstrations of incorrect use of volume so that you can maybe have a look at what you're doing and see it face to face. We'll have a little bit of a conversation in the room that I do most of my teaching in, so that you can actually be a fly on the wall and imagine what it's like when you're listening and some of the things that you might be doing as well. So, give you an example of some things that are happening. This is when I assess people and I give them first a 5-tone scale, just a very, very simple scale like this. One of the things that we find that people do straight away is that they start to use volume as a means of going higher in the voice. So in effect, we're trying to shout louder to get higher, and it sounds like this. You can kind of hear it. It's going wider, the tone is changing. We're using volume incorrectly. We're trying to use volume as a means of going through the range, and that isn't what actually happens when you sing. There is volume, there is use of volume, but use of volume is a more strategic thing, and it's about using it in appropriate places in the music, using it in order to connect sound or to crescendo sound, and it's more skillful. We certainly don't want to be using it just to simply reach notes. So if we get to the points where it gets really stuck, you get to here. And somebody starts, the chin comes up, we're starting to push higher, and the reason that we're doing that is because we're stuck now. We've got so much volume, we've got so much muscle action going on that we actually can't feel the sensation or the resonance changes that naturally happen in a voice to go from low to high, or a speaking voice up to higher notes or a head voice register. Now, we all know that there is no voice in your chest or in your head. So when I refer to these things, I'm not being unscientific. What I'm simply doing is referring to the sensations that we often are used, those sympathetic resonances that we are used to hearing as a singer. And sometimes that's helpful. The science is incredibly helpful at times because we actually can see how the voice works, how the vocal folds stretch, what happens to those muscles. But as emotionally as a singer actually works, we're working with sensations most of the time. And we're trying to work out what is a correct sensation for us and what is an incorrect sensation. So just for means of that only, I'm going to refer to maybe mix, head or chest, rather than its scientific equivalent, just to help you locate some of those sounds, okay? So you can see straight away that if we're trying to sing with volume, from bottom to top, it's not going to get there. You're not going to have your full range. So for people that happen to be singing in that manner, they're just singing stronger and louder in order to get higher. It's really important that their practice is done at what we call a speech voice level. In other words, no louder than talking. You're bringing it back to a medium volume. The reason for that is you're more likely to actually get an appropriate adduction or connection between the vocal folds and the air, creating a balance, than if you're actually bringing in other muscles, compensating, over pushing on the breath, and using a lot of extra effort, which is just more psychologically based than it is physically necessary. So if we were actually going to help correct that in a voice that's pushing too hard, I might do one of two things. First of all, I might take them find the top register and bring that down a little bit so that they're not used to using that volume. And it also encourages them to locate some of those other sensations of pitch in those different places. For instance, if I do this in a female key and then a male key. In a female key, I might take something like the word woo, okay? And the reason I'm using the oo is those narrower vowels will often just encourage you into those more head voice positions, into the thinner position. I'll give you an example. When we're on the roller coaster, we don't go, ah, ah. Sometimes we do maybe, but sometimes we go wee or woo. And it's so much easier to locate those upper tones with a narrower vowel. So I'm going to take the word oo, okay? I'm going to take a W because consonants are fantastic. Consonants are your best friend at times and they can be your worst enemy. They are the things that your vocal folds connect with. W, w. If you just go w, w, you can actually feel the sensation of your vocal folds coming together. G, g. You can feel how hard and glottal that is with the back of the tongue. F, f. Air is coming now before that connection. So consonants will either allow more air, regulate the air, or stop the flow of air. So they are particularly useful in exercises because you can use them to help recorrect imbalances in your own voice. So let's take the example of woo. I'm giving a nice consonant. It glides in specifically for somebody that might be wanting to use too much volume, too much muscle. So I'm using a consonant to glide. I'm using an oo sound to encourage those upper tones and that thinner position in the stretch in the vocal folds, just to access a new kind of sound. So I might go woo, 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 woo. And straight away you can notice that the volume has decreased. I'm not trying to shout, the chin is not higher. Woo, 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 woo. Making sure that we are coming back into that speaking voice and not going one of two things. Woo, 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 woo. I'm not trying to push that hard and I'm not leaving it off. Woo, 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 woo. I'm not leaving it off because that's not the talking voice. Woo, 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 woo. Woo, 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 woo. You hear, it's an even flow of sound, even and at a normal talking volume. So easy to encourage somebody to actually just take that weight, that press, that effort out of singing by just coming from the opposite direction that gives them a new appreciation of where the sound is. So often we're trying to work our way with hard work from bottom to top. So even if we take that woo and we take a longer exercise, and we go woo, 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 woo. Again, you can hear smooth from bottom to top, coming from that speaking voice, moving through the middle into the top end of that sound, back through at the bottom. No pulling, no extra effort involved, helping to keep it at that medium volume. It's a great way of helping singers who are working too hard at that volume to just bring that back and encourage them to actually feel and be more appreciative of those new sounds that are available to them rather than just trying to force it out. It's really common when you find that you're using rehearsal spaces with PAs and the singer can't hear themselves properly. For every singer that can't hear themselves, the only thing that they're going to do is push louder in order to hear themselves. So it's so important that you actually take a practice space where there's no other noise going on so that you can actually get used to moving your voice from bottom to top and hearing the sensations and feeling them for yourself. So there is a time in practice when we do want to use some volume, okay? First of all, it's for people that perhaps have a lighter speaking voice range. They maybe are not connecting in those vocal folds as well as they could be. And there's two reasons for that. I'm going to just deal with one big mistake first of all that I see, which is this. Sometimes I see people trying to overforce their breath. The tone becomes very thin and very weak, and because they hear it as weak, they assume that they're not working hard enough, so they push harder, and this is the result. Ah, ah. You can hear the swallowing muscles are engaged there. There's airiness, there's strain, but there's no tone. There's no tone. So what's going on? First of all, we've got somebody that's straining really hard with a lot of tone. Ah, and you can hear extra compression going on from the outside. And then we've got somebody that seems to be working just as hard, but doesn't have any. Ah. What we've got is inner mechanisms that are getting uncomfortable, compressed, swallowing muscles are edging in, And again, a lot of it is developed psychologically. So sometimes we have to look at connecting this in a different way. Here's what I do if somebody is in that position. I want to get those vocal folds connecting better. So instead of using the W, I might use a stronger, more glottal consonant like a G or a B. So let's say we take the word goo instead of woo, for instance. Goo, 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 goo. As soon as I use that G, it stops people forcing that breath, forcing that larynx out of position, engaging those swallowing muscles and causing themselves all manner of uncomfortable singing. So you can see how even we can use one vowel and a different consonant for two different types of singer to actually recorrect an incorrect tendency or an incorrect way of practicing or developing their voice. We do the same thing. Goo, 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 goo. 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 See the difference? Now I'm not going to leave the men out here. So let's take this in from a position for a guy. For instance, I'm actually going to take it from maybe before the second passage. So it really does encourage a fella to actually find those head voice tones at the same time, or find that thinner sensation in the chords. So let's start here. Woo, 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 woo. So we do want the male to come back into that thicker speaking voice, that more adducted chord position. So be careful, guys, that you're not going woo, 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 and you're coming into a kind of falsetto. So woo, 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 woo. Woo, 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 woo. Woo, 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 woo. Woo, 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 woo. And I think that bottom C is about the limit of my end of range there. If you're a baritone, etc., or a bass, obviously you can continue to go down into that thicker range. You might want to start lower than that position as well. So for instance, if it's a G with that same sound for the guys. Goo, 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 goo. Really encouraging that extra space where the tongue is a little bit flatter and we're not forcing everything up. Goo, 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 goo. 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 I'll leave this for the guys. I can't get any further. So that's one great way to start off practice. Rather than just start trying to sing loud or hard or project it so that you can hear it and see if it's okay, you've got to be thinking way more strategically so that you can actually look at areas of the voice, almost like zones that you work on, areas of the voice that you can work on separately in order to make a better whole. If you then, as a female, then take that woo and you turn it into a goo, 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 then you're much more likely to start to, instead of to pull up, to start that transition round. Same with the guys. So you can see volume is something sometimes that we use incorrectly. But I just want to put a couple of exercises on here for the girls and the guys that have what we call a lighter chest or a lighter speaking voice, where they're not really connecting that well, not because they're pushing too hard, but because we just aren't really used to using any stamina, any strength. We're just quite, laid back about it even. So often you hear this, or even if they're trying to sing with, as we were always told to almost take your head voice all the way down, but that's an incorrect thing to do because my head voice isn't down here in my speaking voice. So sometimes even the way that, that we're taught in language can have a massive effect in getting somebody to sing correctly or incorrectly. So if we've got a light speaking voice, we're going to get things like this. Ah, there just doesn't sound much connection. It's light. In which case, I do want to encourage somebody to sing with a little bit of volume and a little bit of almost an attack into that consonant or vowel. But because it's a desire, because they are not connecting, and I hope you can see that it's not one rule for all singers, and that's what I think I'm trying to get you to understand here. It is not one rule for all singers. Every singer's voice exhibits different tendencies, different issues, and we do so because of different thinking. So it's absolutely vital that we start to understand what our tendencies are, and we can use our practice time appropriately to really strategically sort these issues out. You become more confident, you become more skillful, and your voice works better. So here's an example of something that I would give a singer who's got more of a light chest. Na 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 na. You can see I am deliberately encouraging that connection, that strength, that sound to resonate in the mouth, as it were, not just up into a lighter version of that. And I would take them up through that 5-tone scale in those shorter exercises to encourage a greater level of adduction or connection in the vocal folds. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Now, why that wider, ugly vowel now, that slightly twangy vowel? 2 reasons. I don't want to encourage any more effort from the throat, because often people that have a very light chest voice to start with suddenly develop it and start to push all that breath pressure behind it, and then suddenly we're using all the compensatory muscles. But what I do want them to do is I want to use a wider vowel that drives that sound back into that mouth resonance so that they can see the effect of that, and it's much more connecting in their talking voice. Here it is for the guys. Na, 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 na. Very low for me, so I'll do it the octave higher. Na, 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 na. Na, 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 na. Na, 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 na. And you can hear we're encouraging much more connection. As soon as we get that, we've got the opportunity of taking that voice from the bottom to the top. Na 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 na. And you can hear there's a normal connected speaking voice at the bottom, passing through the middle, going into the top, but we're using that with a stronger sound because that particular type of singer isn't very good at connecting, whereas the previous singers were using so much effort, so much muscle, that they were actually either disconnecting completely or forcing way too much breath pressure or muscle action and over compressing the sound. So just to round off, we're using volume in different ways for different people. First of all, in this particular video, as a practice tool to bring you back into vocal balance. In the next exercise, I will talk about how to use volume in your practice to develop vocal strength. But this is the important video that you need to have a look at about creating overall vocal balance so that you can sing from the bottom to the top of your voice smoothly without any breaks or any cracks or any pulls or any air escapes or leaks in that. We're looking at vocal balance. In lots of other videos to come, I will give you lots of different warm-up exercises on video so that you can sing along too. But for the meantime, start exploring. Where do you think you use volume? Do you think you're too light, or do you think you're pulling too hard? Start using a couple of these exercises to help you develop vocal balance today.